Shalom, shalom, everybody. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com. It's kind of hot here on a nice sunny day. Had a little extra button open there. Not very rabbinic. I'm sure some of you might consider that silly, but I don't. You know something? There is an element that when you represent something, then you have to represent it properly and correctly. And yeah, even though this wasn't exactly, what I wanted to talk about tonight, I just popped into my head and I said, it's very important to talk about. So a little thing like a button is important to mention. Yeah, surprisingly so. Let me digress. We're going to get into a very powerful story tonight about Eliyahu and HaNavi. I'm going to skip the whole thing about his ascent. We'll do that in the next class. To also talk about Elisha. And for those of you who saw the notice for this class, I commented and I mentioned, I called it "Don't Diss the Prophet," using a modern vernacular, because when it comes to the type of individuals with whom we are dealing with, good gosh, it reminds me of something from modern, fiction, like a character like a Darth Vader. I'm sure many of you might remember in the movie Star Wars, where you had the character Darth Vader, who with the power of the Force would take his hand and start crushing somebody's throat. And in the famous line from the original Star Wars, he's choking the guy who was insulting him, and he said, "I find your lack of faith disturbing." In that deep voice that only James Earl Jones could provide. Well, you could say that's evil, isn't it? I mean, isn't Darth Vader the bad guy? Well, we're going to look at some stuff in what the scripture teaches us, and I think we're going to have to challenge our concepts and understanding of good guy versus bad guy. So, when it comes to, as I said, representing something, this is one of my pet peeves when it comes to being a rabbi and teaching, whether it's the Tanakh, the Bible, or anything else. When you come to a text, all right, the one thing when it comes to the definition of what it is to be a scholar means that not that you read the text and interpret it any way you want, but you come to a text, you read it, you understand it the way it was as best as we can, understood the way it was meant to be understood in its day and time, and then see how that text has progressed in understanding, interpretation, and meaning since the time of its inception to the present. And pretty much whatever you look at is always subject to the interpretation in the eye of the beholder. And I think that's a very, very important point, because there's an old saying: history is written by the victors, not the defeated. So we are reading now a review, pretty much, of Chronicles, even though we don't call it the Chronicles, the Devour Hayamim, the words of the days, or the Chronicles, another book. But these books of Kings, it's actually really one book that was actually just split in half by the Christian enumeration of the Bible. But in the Jewish Bible, there's no difference. First Kings, second, there's no first and second Kings. It's all the same. But who wrote this book? Okay? Now, you could look at all the different opinions as to what that is. You can look at religious opinions, scholarly, secular opinions, right? And unlike a book like the Song of Songs, you remember the Song of Songs? Shir HaShirim Shel Shlomo, the Song of Songs that belongs to Solomon. Well, if it says it belongs to Solomon, I'm going to take a wild guess that Solomon probably wrote it, okay? You could say, well, it might not be scholarly. Yeah, I don't know, scholarly, schmolarly, bottom line, that's what it says. So I'm going to take it at face value simply because I don't have other things to turn to at this time that would make me think otherwise. Now, you can take that same argument. So what about the book of Enoch? the book of Enoch says it was written by Enoch. So why don't we just say surface value? It says the book of Enoch, so it was written by Enoch. No. Well, no. There you got a problem. Because when you read the book of Enoch, I'm talking about first Enoch, okay? And you see the stories that are there. And you look for the history of those stories and where they came from. We find that they are of a far later period than the time period that the historical Enoch would have lived. Remember, that was before the flood. Now, remember this, okay? Just a point, whether it's the book of Kings or the Torah, the 5 books, of course, not all of the history is there. None of these books were written to be historical records in the same context and mindset that we think of history today. This is vital. You want to say, I hear people, this is very much more a Christian proclamation than is a Jewish. In the Jewish circles, we understand the fluidity of understanding text. But as you know, in Christianity, we're in which faith and doctrine is paramount, that defines everything for them. They will look at their interpretation or their version of a translation and say, this is the only one, and if this is what it says, blinders, nothing else, that's it. I take only the literal rendition of what it says, and I follow what it says, and you know what I'm doing there when I do that. Well, hey, you believe whatever you want. I'm certainly not opposed. However, and we just mentioned a moment ago about being a scholar, well, then you gotta be honest to the nature and truth of the text. Something as simple as the creation story. Right? God created the world in 6 days. Okay? I to this very moment, I accept that God created the world in 6 days. Period. Done. End of story. Why? Because the Torah says so. Dramatic pause for you to let that digest. But what the heck does that mean? That God created the world in 6 days. All right? What is that? What does the word creation mean? What does the word day mean? Doesn't it say in the Psalms that the day of the Lord is 1,000 years? So therefore, if you want to accept the scripture, well, then the day of the Lord is 1,000 years. So the 6 days of creation happened over 6 days of 1,000 years each. Why? Because that's what the scriptures say. So what took God 1,000 years to do? And is that 1,000 years the day and the night? So the day is only 500 years and the night is 500 years. And if that's the case, then how do I break down an hour? Now, you could say, oh, Rabbi, that's getting kind of ridiculous. Well, no, it's not. Because when you actually go into certain elements of messianic prophecy, and I've written about this before, specifically one text, I think it was a 19th century Syrian Kabbalistic rabbi. The book is called the Yahieli. I've quoted from it, and you go on KosherTorah.com, look up like end of time, scenarios and stuff. He brings this down. And you'll find that there's a lot of interesting stuff when you start breaking down and looking at things according to certain formula. But some who look only with the blinders of what it says, that's a problem. Because you're not then being honest and true to what the text says. And that is a problem. So when you want to say, I am representing the Bible, well, you better be able to represent it, or I should say, have your statements stand up to the challenge of that. Now, a challenge is not necessarily a challenge of faith. For example, y'all know I am an Orthodox rabbi, a Torah observant. I am not a member of the Christian faith, a believer in anything that they hold, but at the same time, I consider my Christian brothers and sisters. Because even though we will disagree on fundamentally diametrically opposed theological issues, our morals and values are one and the same. And in that respect, in the, in quote, war of cultures, they're at my side, whereas those who are opposed to our morals and values are opposite us. In our Torah language, we would call those opposite the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. And you will find, and you see happening here in the Jewish world today, a serious divide. You find that many, many Jews who are becoming more and more secular are at the same time not becoming more and more non-religious, but anti-religious. And as they become more anti-religious, they're becoming also more anti-Israeli. And this includes many Israelis themselves. People who are ashamed of their culture, their heritage, and their history, as opposed to standing proud. Now, this transcends any definition by a group. You have people who are proud of who and what they are, of all walks of life in the Judaic tradition, and those who aren't in all walks of the Judaic tradition. So you can't just say this group is bad or this group is good, because that doesn't exist. That's falsehood and a lie. But if you are going to claim to represent something, then please represent it correctly. For example, I'm teaching Orthodox Judaism. I'm not going to teach something that's not Orthodox Judaism. And if I would or do, then I would say that this is not Orthodox Judaism, so there's no confusion. Let me give you a personal example. When I was first asked to appear on the Ancient Aliens television program, I was originally very cautious and sensitive about not wanting to say things or be appearing to represent positions which would be contrary to our biblical teachings. I mean, I'm dealing with people who are interpreted to be anti-biblical, which I don't think that they are. I'll speak specifically. Eric von Daniken. Eric von Daniken is, Chariot of the Gods fame, and everyone says, well, he said God is an alien. Well, no, he really didn't. I mean, I know Eric personally. We've chatted on many occasions. He's really a nice guy. Whatever his past is, whatever, it's none of my business, none of my concern. I deal with him as the individual who I know as we're sitting down like over drinks, in LA or something like that. And a lovely guy. We will disagree on many things, but we agree on many other things. But that's what was important. So when I first went on Ancient Aliens, I didn't want to go on looking very ethnically Jewish. So I intentionally didn't wear the white shirt, the kippah. I wore something else. And if you go on to, Google my name, Ariel Tzadok, you'll see some of those old pictures of my long beard when it was still white. How did it go from white to dark? Ask my beautiful young wife about that one. But get serious again. I got yelled at. Oh, I got phone calls from my rabbis in Jerusalem. And they said to me, wow, as if wagging a finger at me, hey, you're an Orthodox rabbi. You've been an Orthodox rabbi for 30 plus years. You represent us. You do this right. And I stood admonished. I said, you're right. And you look, and you'll see since then, kippah on the head, suit and tie, because if I'm representing something, then I have to represent what that is. Doesn't matter about me personally. When I go on Ancient Aliens, for example, no one knows me as Ariel or Rabbi Ariel. I'm always the rabbi. When they introduce me on stage, right, they'll say, this is Eric von Daniken, Giorgio, all the famous other guys, and they never say rabbi. I said, this is the rabbi. That's all that I am. I'm a name. I'm a title. Fine. When it comes to representation, you have to do that seriously. And this is important for all of us to understand on a day-to-day basis. Because if you are in public and people look at you, we have this concept in our Torah tradition called Mariat Ayin, the appearance of the eye. And you don't do things that are going to dishonor and disgrace that which you claim to represent. Right now, in our current events here in the United States in July 2020, we are going through a major upheaval of specifically this issue of people wanting to make claims of identity which are not necessarily honest and accurate. And I am certainly not going to take publicly any political side or opinion or view of things, because I know how that will be interpreted. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what side I agree with. I could say I agree on all sides. I'm always going to be subject to division and strife and condemnation because that's the mentality that's out there. I'm out of the fray. I'm zoned out, tuned out. I know everything that's going on in the world today, and you'll hear it here. Things aren't going to get much better real fast because there are certain agendas going on. That's why I have focused our entire KosherTorah school towards helping you as an individual. I don't give a darn who you are. Don't tell me what your religion is. There's no religion. There's no such thing as color. There's no such thing as religion, sexual orientation. There's only one thing. All right? In the beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, right? God created man, which is Adam, which is, male and female, in the divine image. We're all equal in that respect. We all bleed red blood. We're all luminescent beings, like Master Yoda said, not this crude matter. I don't care about anything else. Period. End of story. My purpose and role here is to do something that I hope and pray that I can get God to be, I would honor God in doing. And that is, I want to give people the opportunity to be connected. No, not connected to Orthodox Judaism. I have so many peers out there who are wagging their fingers at the Jewish community saying, be religious, be this, be that. You have other Christian ministers out there who are speaking to the Christian community, Noahide leaders, whatever. I'm not interested in getting you attached to a community, a theology or a doctrine or whatever else. I want you to get reconnected to the universe, to the reality, to God. And we have the old ways that we learn from these tough guys, Eliyahu and Elisha, Elisha, the old school ways of the school of the biblical prophets. That's why we're learning here this stuff. Because I could teach you meditative courses, which I have. Go onto my course pages, you'll see Torah meditation courses, the Chaim Vital stuff, Avraham Abulafia stuff. I got all the stuff, all right? But I'm teaching you from the Word, the Bible, the Word of God, the Word of the Lord, because I want you to see it from its source. It's important for me that you understand one thing. This is not the Torah of Rabbi Bar Tzadok. This is the Torah from the Torah. All right? I have had people comment, Rabbi, how could you say such things? I read to you what it says. If you don't like what it says, that's your choice. But don't say, I said it. This is what it says. And that's what's so important. You, as an individual, you're supposed to have brains in your head. Not to follow what others tell you, but to think independently for yourself. That is the Torah way. Okay? What was that? Yeah, she's tied up. She's out loose. So go tie her up. Okay, so leave it. Darling little shepherd. Had her since she was 6 weeks old. And she is an amazing escape artist. She can get out of anything, anywhere. I once had her, well, I remember this. We had, my truck. And the truck has, the big, camper shell in the back. We have the big dog cage in the back. And I remember it was one winter time. And we brought her with us as my son and I went to the movies. And we had her in the cage in the back. She's safe, comfortable. She had everything there. We come back. Not only is she out of the cage, she's walking around, she's hanging out in the truck. And to this day, we still know how she did that. She, God bless her, she's like that. So Ellie was just over here saying, hey, Sierra got loose. I said, well, we're now in an enclosed fenced yard, so it's not really a problem. But, okay, what are you going to do? Now, many of you might ask, why would I even discuss that now in the middle of something? And the answer is because, like I've always told you, part of that prophetic teaching is what we call in the Kabbalah yichud, or unity. Everything is part of a greater whole. We all know this in life. You experience this every single day. You're focused on this, and all of a sudden, bam, something comes and knocks you to the side. Draws your attention to this, draws your attention to that. And you get so upset because you want to go this way, but life is forcing you that way. Relax, chill out. Go with the flow. That's what's so important. And when you learn the lesson of going with the flow, things work well for you. With that being said, let's just jump into what is now called the book of 2 Kings. Eliyahu and Elisha. Bad A so-and-so. He is a tough guy. If there was ever a Darth Vader on the light side, it would have been Eliyahu. Telling the story real simple, okay? It states here, of course, Ahab died. You remember how Ahab died? We discussed this in our previous class. He had the curse of God on him. And how did he die? Did God strike him dead with a lightning bolt? No. Did Eliyahu and Elisha, one of the holy righteous prophets, assassinate him? No. He went out to war, if you remember the story, and an archer shot his arrow up and over there, and where it fell, I know not where, just so happened to fell and hit the king, piercing his armor, piercing his heart, and he died. That's a pretty good shot. But you might remember the wise words taught later by Daniel, chapter 4, that by the hand of the watchers, right, these angels, they're the ones who are the guardians and the watchers of all things above and below. They're the ones who guided that arrow. We have the same guardian angels who watch over you and I every day. So if you're looking this way and that way at what's going on in the politics and the economy, you're never going to see. That's why we want you to go up, which is really down, to experience, just like Eliyahu, Elisha, and others, to feel and know the Spirit. So, King Ahab's son is now king of northern Israel. And it says here, he fell through a lattice in his upper chamber. Oops, how did that happen? Blame them. All right? And it says he became ill. All right? He's he's in bad shape. What kind of fell? You fall through the roof? And he's in bad shape. So he sends his representatives to the oracle. If this was in Greece, it would have been the oracle of Delphi. But in those days, he went to the god of Ekron, whose name is called Baal Zevuv, which means Lord of the Fly, which it wasn't a god whose name was Lord of the Fly. This is a derogatory term for the god of Ekron, which the authors of this book intentionally make fun of the idolatrous gods. So what and who and where was this god? Who cares? That's not important to us. But we learn that to mock idolatry because of its blatant emptiness is not considered a bad thing to do. You find that all throughout the Bible. And you find that sentiment echoes into later history, in which when Jews and Judaism were later attacked by the church, who elevated the historical Yeshu to godhood and said to the Jews, you have to worship this human being as God. And in the Jewish eyes, that was considered idolatry. And you'll find that the Jewish response to that was always a derogatory polemic. Yeah, those things exist. Just like you see derogatory anti-Semitic polemics against Jews, well, you had anti-Christian polemics by Jews against those who attacked them. This is just honest and truth, and you got to admit it. Does it make it right? No, but at least you can understand it. And let's try to put all of that behind us now, because I hope and think we're in a different state of morality today. At least I hope. So, the king of Israel is sending messengers to a foreign oracle to see whether or not he's going to live or die. So the angel of God, whether that was a human or otherwise, says to Eliyahu and Elisha, a tough guy, Eliyahu Tishbi, right? Go up and meet the messengers and say to them, hey, there's no God in Israel, that you got to go and ask the foreign God what's going to be? Oh, yeah? So guess what? Drop dead. That's pretty much what he said. From the bed upon which you have ascended, you will not descend, for you shall die. All right, that's the nice biblical way of saying drop dead. So then Eliyahu, of course, disappears. Now, he comes and he goes. So typical of Eliyahu. The messengers returned, and they said, king says, it takes you X amount of days to go to the oracle. Why did you come back here? This is one day. And he goes, well, we met this strange, weird-looking guy. And he says, go to the king. And he says, so says, Yud-Keh-Vav-Keh, the God of Israel. There's no God in Israel that you send to Baal-Zebub, the God of Ekron, right? Therefore, drop dead. So he asks the messengers, oh, yeah? What do they look like? Who was this guy? And they said, oh, he's a hairy guy. And he was wearing like a leather belt around his waist. And then, Eliyahu Tishbi, all right. So, curious, Eliyahu was considered hairy. Does that mean he was a Nazir? No. Why would we draw that conclusion? I will tell you this. He was probably not well groomed by today's standards. I don't think anyone by today's standards would have called Eliyahu HaNavi what we say today is a heterosexual. Eliyahu most likely did not groom himself. He probably didn't wear nice lotions and creams and the like to make himself look nice and presentable by modern standards. He's probably a very rough and rugged, tough kind of guy. And the fact that he's described as wearing leather proves that. Because if you were of the aristocracy, you wore nice, fancy clothing made of nice material. So you could see Eliyahu. He's wearing rough type of leather. You want to know what Eliyahu probably would have passed for today? Probably like a 1%er kind of a biker. Probably like a Hell's Angel kind of guy. He probably had long, wild hair, long beard, and he gave a flying hoot about what he looked like. He was wearing most likely would have been tan, dark brown, or black leather. And remember, we don't think that it was so young. He certainly was muscular and tough, judging from how we have descriptions of him. He looked like a bad you-know-what. And, oh yeah, he stood out because he was a tough guy. And that's how he was recognized. So, he's sentenced like this. I'm going to get this guy. Once and for all, my dad couldn't get him, I'm going to get him. So the king then sends a captain and his 50 men. All right? Equivalent like 2 platoons of soldiers. And he goes, go up, find this guy, and bring him to me now. So they find him. Eliyahu is sitting on top of a mountain. And the captain says to him, hey, man of God, get your down here now. All right? The Hebrew, it says to him like here, right? HaMelech deber. The king says, get your. And think of it. I want you to think of it in the modern vernacular, how we would say things. Even though obviously those words aren't used, the intention, when you understand the inflection of the Hebrew language, you understand how that would be. It would have been the equivalent of a military soldier here. Imagine this, you have a religious guy, and he's up on a high ground. And they call out the SWAT team or the special forces, and they surround him from all sides. They have their guns trained on him. And the leader calls up and says, hey, the king says, get your blankety-blank butt down here now, so-called man of God. So, remember Eliyahu? This is the guy who fled before Jezebel. He was concerned about her occultic powers, not her physical powers. So how does he respond to such an affront? Oh, I'm a man of God, am I? Okay, now if I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and burn you and your 50. And like a Darth Vader, these guys are wiped out. Now, a couple of things here we have to question. Number one, we will take for acceptance at first grade that this is actually an historic story. Let's say it really happened, okay? Is there a question that really happened? Scholars and skeptics are going to question it, but we'll get to that in a minute. But we're accepting because it's our faith that this is a historical question, a historical fact. Now, this is the question you need to ask. It says fire came down from heaven. Where is that? What is the fire? Well, again, see your movie version of it. You know what fire is. You know the stuff you have burning in your barbecue? Comes down from the sky. Where in the sky? Did it come from a mile high? Did it come from 100 miles high? Did it come from the moon? Where did it come from? Now, why is that important for us to even ask? And the answer is because if we really want to accept this as history, which from our faith, of course, we do, then you got to look at the story. Some form of energy called fire. Why do I call it energy? Because as we're going to learn in our next week's class, remember we had horses and chariots of fire that came down and take Eliyahu. Well, they could have been actual fire because the minute Eliyahu got on, it would have burned up. It would have been the end of Eliyahu. So it wasn't exactly fire. So, but these guys are toasted. What came down? We don't know. Where did it actually come from? We don't know. But in light of our modern understanding of reality, we have to ask the question. And this is the question. What really happened? Okay? We say that, of course, Malachim are in charge of things. The Malachim are the ones who, remember, caused the king to fall through his roof. That led that arrow to kill Ahab, his father. So, they're the ones, obviously, who are somehow behind the fire. Where did it come from? What was its nature? We do not have an answer for that. But rather than look at this mythologically, we must, if we accept it as a historical fact, recognize that there must be some technology behind it. There ended up being 51 dead bodies toasted. Well, somehow they died. By what? What was the nature of their death? Where did it come from? No, I am not saying that there was a flying saucer above it hidden in a cloud and it sent down a beam. No, the USS Enterprise didn't open up with open phasers and burn them or anything of the kind. But what really happened? I don't know. Was it something from a parallel dimension? Was it something from some kind of technological device such as a ship, hidden, invisible, or the like? None of these things can be dismissed as being real. We just don't know. We have to admit it. But yet, something real did happen. And now, from the secular point of view, who says, no, this is just a story that's used to embellish the power of the prophet. Okay, let's look at it from that point of view. Remember we talked about being a scholar, we have to look at all the different sides. We don't accept that point of view, but nevertheless we will entertain it, not to disprove or prove, but to discuss it, to understand it. If this story, true, false, doesn't matter, but what is the message here? The message is you don't mess with the prophet. The message is there are things that are more important than life itself, and that is respect. Eliyahu is not responding out of fear for his life. He is responding as a response to a slight to his honor. He says, oh, you want to dishonor? You want to diss the prophet? This is what you get. Bam! And from this, regardless of the historicity of the story, like I said, we learn a very, very valuable moral point. And that is, it should be what I call the 11th commandment. Thou shalt always show respect. I could disagree with all kinds of people from all different walks of life. I don't care. But at the same time, you should never ever show disrespect. We don't call people names. We don't disrespect them. We don't dishonor them. We're going to disagree. We disagree, but we disagree respectfully. And I believe that if we elevate the level of the dialogue and the conversation to one of respect, then we don't end up becoming toast. I think that's a very important lesson for us to learn. Now, again, looking at this from a modern moralistic point of view, can you imagine if we had a religious figure today who is suspect of acting in a way which is treasonous to the authority of government? Now, they would probably call him a domestic terrorist. That's probably what they would have called Eliyahu in the day. And they sent out the army, the SWAT team, the National Guard to come and get him. And somehow, somewhere, he unleashes a weapon of mass destruction and kills all those who go after him. What would we call that today? Notice I used all the correct modern terminologies to describe what the king of Israel would have thought of what happened. How do we know that he would have looked at this in such a horrible way, meaning negative way? Because what's the next thing that he does? Verse 11. And he again sent him another captain of 50 and his 50 men. And this time again, the captain speaks disrespectfully. And he goes, yo, man of God, Ko Amar HaMelech. The king says, Mehera Reda, get your butt down here now. Oh yeah, man of God, am I? So, and again, it happens, right? Whoosh, Ish comes down from heaven, wipes them all out. Life is cheap. When you show disrespect, karma takes its course. Heaven responds. Now, why is this an important lesson for us? Notice, Eliyahu never lifted a glove in the hand of violence. Neither does Elisha. Neither did the prophet Micaiah before him when he prophesied against the king. No man of God raises the hand of violence. We have only pretty much, well, he had Samson, but Samson, he was attacked. You know, if you're attacked, you fight to kill. I mean, what are you going to do? You have the example, of course, of Pinchas. But Pinchas actually committed an act of murder, and if it wasn't by prophecy, he probably would have been condemned as a murderer and executed. Eliyahu called for the death of the prophets of Baal. But whether or not he actually did the murder or not, well, that can be debated. But the point is here, respect, yes. Let God do the rest. I think this is a very, very important lesson because you have so many religious people today who have these ego aggrandizements in their head. They think themselves prophets and weirdo stuff. And so, oh yeah, God's with me, and I'm with God. And if you don't do as I say, Zappo. Okay, yeah. Okay, people like that may be dangerous and maybe need to be put away for our safety. But, you know, that's not the religious way. Do we fight to defend ourselves? Of course we do. Do we even, if necessary, have to shed blood to defend ourselves? But of course we do. That's common sense. Yeah, I'm a big believer in self-defense and self-preservation. And in that respect, you know, protecting oneself as one's, you know, need be. But when it comes to issues of honor, we don't turn the other cheek. That's not a Jewish way. For Yeshu to have sent that, I kind of really question if that's what he meant, if that was his original teaching. Because we don't really see that in his life. Yeshu lived by the Torah code, as do all the rabbis, which is an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And if you show disrespect, that's a big deal. It says that if you are a sage for the zeal and zealousness of Torah, like Eliyahu, don't forgive. If someone wants to offend me as an individual, who cares, right? Ego schmigo. But if you offend, and you insult the Torah, the religion, the rabbinate, and the like, that's something else. That is a slight that needs to be responded to. And that's the same thing with all of the things that we hold sacred, right? Individual slights, who cares, right? But when it comes to something bigger and better, the values that we hold sacred, well, that you gotta hold seriously. Third time's the charm. What happens then? The third man of God comes, all right? But this time he climbs up and he kneels and he bows down before Eliyahu and he begs him, man of God, please don't kill me like you did the others, all right? Hey, I'm not going to disrespect you. You know I got orders to follow. I got things to do. You know, I pray, please don't kill us like the others. It says here that the angel of God says, okay, this guy is cool. Go with him. Go down with him and fear him not. So he rose and he spoke and says, so says the Lord, since you sent messengers, right? Eliyahu now goes in front of the king. I'm going to take a wild guess that he didn't shower. He didn't comb his hair, probably didn't take a shave, put on deodorant, and look all nice and appropriate to be in the presence of the king. Probably came looking like that big old gnarly, what we would today call biker look, that Darth Vader black. Right? And he has the koach to say to the king straight out, right? What? There's no God in Israel? You got to go inquire of the other oracle? Really? Okay, tell you what, drop dead. Says it right to his face. And verse 17, he died in the word of the Lord that Eliyahu has spoken. All right, and then it says somebody else came and reigned after him. Whoa, that's pretty intense, don't you think? You learn from this entire story the nature and matter of respect. Now, chapter 2 teaches us about Eliyahu's ascent into heaven. We'll get to that. We'll do that next class. But at the end of chapter 2, all right, there's a similar story about Elisha. And Elisha, who's now, as you know, Eliyahu's replacement, now the head of the prophets, another bad, you-know-what, tough guy. And it states here like this, the end of chapter 2, right? They go looking for Eliyahu, went up to heaven, as we'll talk about next week. They don't find him. So what does he do? It says here, I gotta go. On verse 23, it says that he leaves this place and he's going to a place called Bethel, and he's walking along the road, right? It says here that there are young children. Oh, sweet little innocent children. And he's on the road, and the children are out there, and they're insulting him. And they're calling him Kerach, right? Baldy, all right? Well, shouldn't he just turn the other cheek? Did they make an insult and offense against him being a prophet? No. Oh, we just learned with Eliyahu and Elisha, don't mess with the prophet. But here, what does Elisha do? What would you do? You're minding your own business, walking down, someone is making fun of you because of your physical appearance. Today, we have all kinds of shaming like this that I see in public social media. Disgusting. What should we do? Well, we are taught. Rise above it. Ignore it. Show yourself superior and don't pay attention. Yeah. That's my dramatic pause. Well, apparently Elisha was of a different point of view. Now remember, you want to argue and debate whether or not this is a historical story, fine. That's not the point. The point is, what is the message of the author of the text? And that message is, you don't mess with a prophet. You don't show disrespect or you pay the price. What happens to these children? Children. These aren't adults who are insulting him based upon religion. These are young children who are acting in the typical bullying fashion that many children, youths, to this day act. I don't know how many of you might remember the junior high school years, 12 and 13, 14. I remember those days. Those are the days we used to fight all the time. Used to get in a fight in the lunchroom. Used to go to the back gate of the school and used to fight. Well, my day, fighting. No one brought guns and knives. It was all punching and stuff. But, you were tough. You stood up for yourselves. What does Elisha do? Verse 24. He turns around, he sees the children, and he curses them in the name of Hashem. Right? And pretty much, it's pretty nasty. And I curse you in the name of God. What's going to happen to them? Obviously, right? Nothing good. They will lose their financial future. Maybe they'll get sick or something else. Or maybe, they'll pay attention. They'll see the bad things that happen in their lives and they can repent and, go on to be good. No, I don't think so. Curses them in the name of God, and 2 mother bears, it says, come out of the forest and tears apart 42 children. 42 kids. Can you imagine if something like that happened today? In which any kind of a wild animal attacked a band of children and tore apart 42 of them. That would be global news. We would hear about that around the world. Can you imagine if a wild tiger got loose in areas of India and attacked and mauled children? A wild lion in Africa. I remember a very curious story that happened many, many years ago in New York City, in which a young African-American child went into the enclosure of a polar bear in July in the Bronx Zoo and was mauled to death. What are the chances of a child whose ancestors from Africa would be in New York and run into a polar bear from the Arctic who, in the middle of the summer, and meet his fate there? My goodness, talking about those angels putting things together. I guess that young boy met his fate, whatever it was. 42 children. What is the morality in this? You think about it. It does say that the prophet was disrespected. He cursed them in God's name, and they died. Now, again, in our faith in history, we accept that that's what happened, and that's what the prophet did. You don't mess with the prophet. The author of our text tells this story, just like with Eliyahu's killing of all of the soldiers by the hand of God, that it seems to have been the right thing to do. This was understood and interpreted as an applaudable moral act. Now, here's the deal. We don't hold like that anymore, now do we? We don't think that this is a good thing anymore, do we? Think about it. Look at all the disrespect and dishonor that is poured out on people of religion, regardless of what your religion is today. Every religion is facing this from a hostile opposition. And I don't think any of us are innocent of this, because we all look at that other group and we heap upon them insult and offense, just like they heap upon us offense and insult. Religious attack secular, who are attack religious, who attack with this group, who attack that group. Everybody's attacking everybody else in the most nasty, disgusting way. And everybody would only wish that they had the power of an Elijah or an Elisha to call down fire from heaven or to curse you in the name of God and you get wiped out. The author of our text describes this in an applaudable way. But again, I remind you that this was a value and a morals that were from 2000 ballpark, 700 years ago, a long, long time ago in a land far, far away. These are no longer our morals and values. We do not call down fire from heaven or curse our enemies. Now, at the same time, that does not mean that we have to turn the other cheek. It does not mean that we tolerate abuse. No one should ever tolerate abuse. But at the same time, there is a right and a wrong way to respond to abuse. If someone, and I see this all the time on social media, I find it very, very offensive that people call each other names and insulting, whether it be offending and insulting the president of the United States or other leaders. I mean, this to me is inappropriate and wrong. And it's not just that people express their political opposition to our present president. People said pretty much the same things to previous presidents. And they say this about other political leaders around the world. I don't believe that such expressions of disrespect is proper and moral. I just don't. And I don't think anybody's calling down fire from heaven or calling out wild animals to come and devour you. But we learn a lesson from the author of this text that such behavior is worthy of such kind of, if you will, divine retribution. I believe that our biblical lesson is that the nature of the dialogue is very simple. Number one, we do not accept abuse. We do not tolerate that type of offensive insult. But at the same time, the nature of the interaction must be one to solicit respect as opposed to divine retribution. You should be offended when individuals disrespect you. But the proper, I would say, or best way is to disavow. What I do, for example, here, I get comments all the time on, for example, on YouTube, on the videos that I put up there. And every now and then, I get some unscrupulous individual who will, express together all kinds of profanities and insults and and I will never honor them by allowing those comments to see the light of day. And I most certainly will not respect them by responding. If you have an honest and sincere question or criticism, and you approach it in a proper way, by all means, I believe that rises our moral obligation to interact, and we do so in a proper way. If we look at our political and we actually address the realistic issues in a proper way, as opposed to a derogatory way, we can make some real accomplishment, believe it or not. Not by seeking to offend and insult and to provoke. What does that do? It destroys. But to address real and sincere issues in a proper, respectful way, that, I think, is worthy and an appropriate way. So we look at the examples here of Eliyahu. When he was approached with proper respect, he responded. He didn't back down on his position. He pretty much told the king, the son of Ahab, right? Hey, you want to act inappropriate to your position of king of Israel by seeking out a foreign god? Remember, as king of Israel, you represent the nation of Israel. You're supposed to act accordingly. And if you don't want to do that, that is a public dishonor and a disgrace. And, modern vernacular, drop dead. Now, Eliyahu didn't strike him dead. Remember, the king, had an accident. And the king only wanted to know if he would recover. And Eliyahu said, no, you're not. All right? God says you're not. That's it. You don't want to ask God? You don't want to go with God? Fine. Face your destiny. And that was it. Did anybody try to punish Eliyahu? If you remember, Jezebel was, she's dead now, but she was going to send assassins. All right? Where were all those assassins? I assume they were still in the employ of the government. No one touched Eliyahu. No one went after him. All right? And as we see after this story, he goes, takes his chariots of fire up to heaven. But we learn from this his morals and values. When people show respect, you interact with respect. The two first captains disrespected him. They didn't just call to him and said, come on down. When they referred to him as the man of God, and this is what doesn't get translated into the English, they were being derogatory and disrespectful. As if they were saying, hey, you stupid religious freak. All right? The real authority says. Now, you don't talk to people like that. That's inappropriate and wrong, and we all should know it. Again, dialogue needs to be elevated. When children, little children, show disrespect, what? So, Elisha was bald. Hey, I'm bald. All right? People are going to make fun of me being bald. I curse them until the cows come home. Bears aren't going to come out of the woods and chew people up. That's not going to happen. You don't like my hair or lack of hair? What can I say? I could care less. But apparently Elisha did. He took it seriously. And 42 children. Now, how many mothers were mourning? How many of the people of the day correlated and understood that the act of the mauling of these children was as a response to their disrespect to the prophet? Our book tells the story. But was that story known at the time? when the parents had to come and collect their children. We're parents. Can you imagine the pain, the suffering of all those families, the loss of their kids? And let's say they did know that it's because of what Elisha said. And you're the parent. How would you have responded? Master Elisha, I'm so sorry that my child offended you by speaking in such a way. He deserved what he got. Is that how you would think? I don't think so. If anything, it would turn you against them. At least that's what I would think. So, how does the author of our text deal with that? He doesn't. The author of our text does not address how the parents would have thought about the children. But we should. We should think like that. We should question. Because if we want to be moral and decent and righteous and good human beings, regardless of any and all differences, then to focus on that unity which integrates and unites us, and to extend the respect due to all other forms of life, whether it be good old Sierra doggy outside, or human beings, or whatever, then we recognize the whole world is full of God's glory. We are all created in the divine image. We show respect, we show honor, and we learn from these biblical stories the right lesson. Not to call down fire and brimstone on our enemies, but rather to have self-respect for ourselves, not to tolerate abuse. And if someone continues to wishes to abuse you, well, I'll tell you what I do. I pay them no mind. If someone, for example, in social media, when we interact, if they act abusively, they speak derogatorily, cut them off. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to deal with you. It's very simple. If you want to interact in dialogue, you do so in a respectful way. If you're going to be disrespectful, adios. That's my way, in modern ways, of calling down the fire from heaven, having the she-bears come out. Because I am not willing to tolerate someone acting disrespectfully or abusively. And I will not interact in that way. I refuse to be dragged into the gutter. And I think that is a proper and wise moral lesson for all of us to learn, and what I'm bringing out of these stories for today. Okay, enough said. You're interested more about the meditative stuff that we teach here? Go check out our meditative courses. Understand the real meaning of biblical prophetic Kabbalah. It's not mystical, magical, high-in-the-sky stuff. It's bringing that high-in-the-sky stuff down to earth for real, practical, what we call in Hebrew, tikkun, fixing this world and making it a better place. Showing respect is always a really good way to bring that tikkun. Let's conclude on that note. Again, Ariel Tzadok, KosherTorah School, thanking you for being here and listening to me blab all night here. Let's be respectful, always. Talk to you all soon.